Hey, everybody, it's Bob Goodwin, and welcome to another edition of Career Club Live. We really appreciate you guys taking some time. If you're not familiar with Career Club, please check us out at career.club, where we're using proven sales and marketing techniques to help you find a career that matters to you. I'd also like to thank my colleague, Joey Pace, who is the magic behind making today's podcast happen. So, Joey, thank you as always. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our guest today. It's Dorie Clark. I am over the moon to have Dorie on today. I'm going to read a little bit of her bio because it's quite significant, and we'll get into that in just a second. But Dorie's been named one of the top 50 business thinkers in the world by Thinkers 50. She's a keynote speaker and teaches executive education at Duke University. She's also a Wall Street Journal bestselling author of The Long Game, Entrepreneurial You, Reinventing You, and Stand Out, which was named the #1 leadership book of the year by Inc. magazine. A former presidential campaign spokeswoman, she writes frequently for the Harvard Business Review. And oh yeah, she's also won a Grammy. So with that, Dorie, welcome.
Hey, Bob. So great to be here.
No, it's great to have you. So where do we find you today?
I am in sunny Miami, Florida.
Nice. I'm jealous. It's, I think, about 35 degrees here in beautiful Cincinnati, Ohio, and I guess you're probably in the 70s.
I think it's about 35 degrees higher than where you are. Yes.
I think it is. But like I said, Dorie, I've been a follower of yours for a long time. I know that you got your podcast that you do with Newsweek. You publish regularly Harvard Business Review, other big business publications, TED Talks, etc. So it's just really a privilege and an honor to have you on today.
Thank you so much. It's great to talk with you and do Career Club.
Come on. So as our want, we typically do a little bit of an icebreaker. So 5 super easy questions just to help the audience get to know you a little bit. So easy first one. Where were you born and raised?
I was born in the Gulf Mecca of Pinehurst, North Carolina.
Oh my gosh, that is a golf mecca. My son desires to live in Pinehurst, North Carolina. That's a beautiful area. Cool. What happened to your accent?
You know, most people in Pinehurst don't have an accent, right? Because everybody's streaming down from places like Cincinnati, Bob. That's how we roll in Pinehurst.
I guess that's probably true. A little bit just about your education background. Where'd you go to school?
I did 2 years of undergrad at Mary Baldwin in Virginia, and then I finished up my undergrad at Smith College in Massachusetts.
And what was your original degree in?
I had my undergrad in philosophy, and then I later got a master's degree in theology at Harvard Divinity School.
I thought that you had a divinity degree. That's right. And then really quick, just a little bit about your family.
Well, my mom is still in North Carolina, and I feel very lucky. I get to hang out with her a lot. I'm taking her on a trip in a couple of weeks to Mexico, and nice. She's fantastic. My dad died a number of years ago.
Well, that's really great that you can spend time with your mom like that. Now, I read kind of very quickly the speed version of your background, but do you mind just giving folks a little bit of a sense for your career arc? Because I think it's really interesting because it's fairly nonlinear, and that resonates with people that they don't always have to have a very traditional career path. And I'd love for you to just kind of paint that picture for a moment.
Yeah, certainly. It is true. I mean, my first book was called Reinventing You, and it was inspired in large part because I had such a fairly disjointed start to my career and felt like I had to figure everything out because so many pathways that I was attempting to pursue were not working. So very quickly, I thought I was going to go into academia. After my master's degree, I applied to doctoral programs, didn't get in, needed a new plan, got a job as a journalist, did it for a year, got laid off, ended up working on political campaigns. I worked for a couple of pretty high profile campaigns, including a presidential race. Everybody lost. So I had to come up with a new plan, became a nonprofit executive director, did it for a couple of years. It was extremely high stress and extremely low paid. So I decided, and it's contrary to perhaps the narrative that most people have, but I decided that being an entrepreneur was actually a much more stable career path than working for this little underpaid nonprofit. So I began that in 2006 and have been working for myself ever since.
Awesome. And you're obviously killing it and doing a great job. And then just lastly, What do we find you doing when you're not keynoting and writing best-selling books? What do you like to do for fun?
Well, my current passion, which I started during the pandemic, I used to go out and buy coffee every day as kind of a forcing function to like get up and get out of the house and take a walk and things like that. But during the pandemic, when that became a little bit harder to do, I ordered a espresso machine, and I decided to commit myself to becoming a latte art artist. And I have to say, 2+ years later, I'm still not very good.
Oh, come on.
It is really hard to be good at latte art, but I am continuing the quest, and every morning I make a very, very good faith effort to become the world's best latte artist.
I think those are, and what are your top 2 or 3 favorite designs that you aspire to get better at?
Oh man, I mean, the first one is like, there's like a heart and there's kind of tulips, and those are the sort of first building blocks that you have to do. And honestly, I'm still kind of working on those. So I'd be happy if I could get those properly. The TLDR, Bob, is that it's all in the frothing. You've got to be able to froth the milk effectively. And I recently got a new machine, a different brand of machine, so I'm having to relearn the frothing process. Oh. So, it's baby steps, but I'm proud.
It's all about the froth. I like that. Okay, that'll be your next book. So as I told you earlier, I've really enjoyed following your content. So much of it resonates with me. And as I think about our clients at Career Club, oftentimes they find themselves either in jobs that they don't love, but it's sort of what I know, and I kind of keep doing it. And then sometimes somebody makes a decision for them that, and you talked about it, with your journalism, that you got laid off. And obviously that's very topical with what's going on in the news these days. But it seems like whether we're forced into it or somehow we just finally get miserable enough, or as we say down south, sick and tired of being sick and tired, that, it's time to do something new. People tend to not take maybe necessarily as strategic a view of their career as they could. And I wonder, and I know this is a big theme in the long game, if you could sort of talk about the importance of really having a plan and how to do strategic thinking when it comes to our careers.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's true, obviously, that for most of us as individuals, it's very hard to see the forest for the trees when it's your career you're talking about. Everything feels kind of unique and individual and just complicated. And that is true for everyone. I mean, part of why I wrote my first book, Reinventing You, was just feeling like, it's not obviously that there weren't career resources out there exactly, but it all felt so amorphous and so disorganized to me. Yeah. I felt like I was having to figure it all out on my own, which can be a large existential burden. And so I wanted to try to create something that was a little bit more of a structured pathway so that other people didn't feel like they were having to do it all solo as well. Because, a lot is at stake, right? I mean, income, of course, is at stake, but also there's a lot of matters of self-identity. If you've always thought of yourself as being an X and then suddenly you aren't anymore, it can be a little bit discomforting to try to find a new identity that you feel comfortable settling into. And in fact, one of the things that I've seen is that oftentimes our identity has a lag compared to our reality, sometimes of several years, in terms of how you think of yourself and even talk about yourself with other people. In Reinventing You, I profiled one woman who became the head of an education nonprofit. And literally years after she took this job, she was at a cocktail party and her husband overheard her, and she was introducing herself, and the person said, "Well, what do you do?" And she said, "Well, I'm a teacher." And the woman said, "Oh, what do you teach?" And then, the person said, sort of had to stop and be like, "Oh, well, I mean, I don't like literally teach now. I mean, I kind of run this nonprofit," which is, I mean, honestly, a completely different field. And afterwards, her husband was like, "Why are you still introducing yourself as a teacher?" And she honestly just hadn't really thought about it, that in her mind, that's still where she was, even though the reality was very different. So we have to just recognize and meet people there that this is a process. And I think we feel bad sometimes that, everybody else has it figured out. Well, the truth is, of course, not everybody has it figured out. I am a really big fan of just being gentle with ourselves and understanding that, we don't necessarily have to have the 10-year vision, the 20-year vision. It's kind of like driving in the fog. And as long as you can keep identifying the next best step, you will be able to get there eventually, even if you don't quite know what the final destination is.
Well, it's interesting, picking up on that last bit about driving in the fog, is things keep changing. There's all, kind of the next thing I wasn't expecting just happened. And so what was it, Mike Tyson, everybody has a plan until you get punched in the nose. And, and it's kind of the same thing, right? I mean, sometimes these things happen to us. But having said that, maybe you talked earlier about this kind of amorphous and to bring more structure to it. Do you mind just elaborating on what that structure might look like?
Yeah, absolutely. So in Reinventing You, I lay out kind of a roughly 3-part process of thinking about your professional reinvention. And the first part is just really kind of getting clear on, what is your brand now in the marketplace, so to speak. Yeah. Like how are you known? How are you thought of by other people? Because number one, there's a lot of power in understanding that, because it enables you to kind of lean into your strengths and harness what you are known for and what other people think, oh yeah, that's a special talent. But also it's useful because it can sometimes identify gaps. If you, for instance, really want to get promoted into a leadership role, but you're viewed as like a super tactical person, it's not that that's a bad thing. That's actually a perfectly good thing to be viewed as, but it's not entirely complementary to a senior level position, which is meant to be more strategic. So you just realize like, oh, okay. I mean, it's not terrible to be thought of as a good tactician, but it's not really appropriate for where you want to go. So getting your bearings is step number one in understanding where you are now. Number two is getting clearer on sort of defining the brand that you want. So it's beginning to create the vision, doing enough research to at least have a preliminary sense of where you're heading, so that essentially, you can triangulate the path between where you want to go and where you are now. It enables you, if you have those two data points on a map, the plan kind of writes itself in a lot of ways. Oh, okay, if I really need to be viewed as more strategic, or, oh, if I really want to get a job and move to California, then I guess, I need to start networking with more people who live in California, or, whatever it is. But you can work backwards from that future identity that you want. And then, finally, once you kind of get there, once you start establishing that traction and getting to the place you want, I think an important part that often gets overlooked is that people sometimes think that career change or professional reinvention is like a one-time event. And I like to beat the drum that, we need to understand this is not a one-time thing and then it's over forever, right? Because you keep meeting people, you keep interacting with people, they keep formulating, opinions about you. And so we need to continually be cognizant about the messages we're sending. Now, it doesn't mean we have to get paranoid or get in our heads about, oh, in this given moment, what micro signals am I sending? Like, it's not like, oh, it's this, terrible burden that we have to take on at all times. But it just means we need to be a little bit smarter and a little bit more thoughtful on an ongoing basis to make sure we don't get slack, like, okay, if you really want to be known as like, Bob's an innovator or something like that. Well, okay. Are you making a point when you're connecting with people to talk about subjects related to the future or related to innovation? Are you making a point, at least periodically on social media, to be posting about, what's coming next, or sharing articles about exciting new technologies? Like those are the little things that can help reinforce, oh, yes, Bob is known for innovation. Yeah.
So, gosh, tons of things we could even unpack in all of that, because when we're working with clients, they're often kind of like, well, Dorie, the thing I've done the longest is this. Maybe the thing I'm most known for is this. The thing I'm actually the most interested in is something else. And so, like, which one do I choose? And I'd say that's a false choice, because that's like saying I've got milk, eggs, flour, and sugar. Which one should I be? And we talk about baking a cake. Like, how do you synthesize those things and create this very unique value proposition that somebody's like, wait a minute, you've been a journalist and a campaign manager and a divinity student and an authority on career stuff. Like, how do you bring all that together to create this really unique value proposition and then go identify in the marketplace who's looking for something like that? And so I can be very intentional with my networking at that point, back to your point, like California or whatever. Now it's got some direction and some purpose and some intent behind it, and not getting lost in the, oh my gosh, which one do I be? I can only be one.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point, Bob. That's exactly right. There is so much black and white thinking when it comes to careers. And, the truth is, most people you talk to, like, not people like you who are providing guidance, but I mean, like, the people in our lives, frankly, are very uncreative about things. People often, one of the points that I've discovered, which is a little ironic and sometimes a little bit sad, and we just have to brace ourselves for it, is that we often assume that our greatest supporters are going to be our friends and family. But often that's not the case, because it is in their self-interest to perpetuate the status quo. And they sometimes get worried if you are doing something that they view as disruptive to them or their quality of life. I mean, they're not going to frame it that way, obviously. They're going to be like, no, I'm just concerned about you. I don't want you to be disappointed, but it's like, really, they're just like, well, what am I going to do if he's not making any money anymore, And so we have to be aware that we may be getting pushback from people that we love and trust, and that theoretically have our best interests at heart. And they probably do in a lot of ways, but it just means that we actually have to be strong enough to recognize that we need a little bit of a promotional campaign that we run internally with our own stakeholders to get their buy-in, so that they understand that a career change that we're making is going to be really important to us, and that it's something that they should hopefully get on board with as well.
Well, you talked about becoming an entrepreneur, yourself. And, I remember having a chat with my wife a few years ago when we took an entrepreneurial plunge. And she's like, but wouldn't you rather be like, be like John? He works at this big company and it's safe. Yeah, well, it was safe until it wasn't. And there's definitely a pick your poison, kind of quality to this. And I would much rather be in control of what I'm doing and kind of live and die by, my efforts and what I'm actually interested and passionate about, instead of, I can go make a living like that until I'm a cell on a spreadsheet that becomes convenient for a cost savings move. Right.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
I mean, everything has, kind of its plus and minus, and you've got to figure out what works for you, not what works for everybody else they think you should be doing.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's true, of course, that if you have, family commitments and financial responsibilities, you can't just go be quitting your job willy-nilly. Of course, that's not what we're saying. I'm a big fan. I mean, this ties into The Long Game, my most recent book that you were alluding to, Bob. I'm a big fan of long runways, right? If you want to make a professional career pivot, but you feel that you have sort of a golden handcuff situation where you're locked in, you got college tuitions or mortgages or whatever, doesn't mean you can't do it. It may just mean you can't do it yet. And you need to plan and create a financial cushion for yourself. You need to make sure you're setting aside money. It may mean that it takes longer than you want because you're doing things on the side and experimenting at first so that you can replace your income and not just have the spigot completely turn off. It's wanting to do career change is not an excuse to be irresponsible, but it also does not mean that you have to subsume your own interests and passions and desires and curiosities forever because there are other people in your life. They get a vote, but you get an even bigger vote.
Well, and to your point about it not being black and white, I mean, there's the opportunity to go volunteer, like go try that out. Go dedicate some of your spare time to this. Oh, you think you're interested in this career pivot? Well, go start doing some certification training in it. Go audit a class at a university that this is what they talk about, right? Do informational interviews with people that are doing these things. It's not like, well, I can't do anything in that regard. There's lots of things that you can be doing. And again, honestly, with Career Club, we had a 15-year runway that finally culminated in now it was the right time. The other thing that you're talking about, long waves, is we're just all living longer. And the 40-year career is turning into the 60-year career, particularly for Gen Z. And there's multiple opportunities to reinvent yourself. So I'm wondering how you think about that with just sort of this kind of mega demographic change.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, Bob. You're exactly right. And yes, I want to underline what you're saying, that there's so many ways that people can start doing things. I mean, even if you are in a position where you feel like, oh, there's nothing I can do. Well, you can always like do networking in a particular thing. If you want to be moving into a particular place, there is no law saying that you can't start meeting people, making connections, and building things out, because that's something that you're going to need to be doing anyway whenever and if you do make a switch. So starting now to build that network is so incredibly powerful, because that would already be in place as an initial measure whenever you do decide to move forward, and you'll learn a lot more in the process. So I think that's exactly valuable and right. There's lots you can be doing. To your point about longer lifespans, that's really true. There was a lot of interesting research around all of this. But, I remember a very sort of sad moment that I bore witness to. I remember years ago when Reinventing You first came out, there was this book fair that I participated in. And I was, it was a whole bunch of different authors. And so, you had your little booth and you were doing a book signing and stuff. And so people were walking around and browsing the books. And there was a woman who came by my table and she picked up my book and she started, sort of flipping through it and reading the jacket. And at a certain point, she just sort of read, and then she literally like slammed it down. Obviously, I think something was triggered. She slams it down. And she says, "Well, I'm over 50. It's too late for me." And I remember just thinking like, excuse me, you're probably demographically going to live at least 30 years, more likely another 40, even 50. I mean, the average, American woman is living into her late 80s now. If you're in your early 50s and you say, "Oh, my professional life is over, too late for me," I mean, that's just an embarrassment. It's so far from true. And obviously it creates a self-fulfilling prophecy, because if in your head you're like, "Oh, I shouldn't bother to learn anything new. I shouldn't bother to try anything new." I mean, it's going to be a fairly depressing 40-year time span. But I would never wish that on anyone, because I find it so patently false. There is plenty of time for people who are 50 plus to develop new careers and new interests. And age is a really poor excuse. I think it is so related to attitude. So I think that switching to a second, third career is entirely doable, and it is something that really should be encouraged. So I think what you're doing and talking to folks, Bob, is very powerful.
Well, thank you on the topic of ageism. Because we work with clients who are 50 years and plus, and they're like, "Oh, I keep getting rejected because of ageism, and everything is sort of being laid at the feet of ageism." I'm like, really? So what do you know about, because I talk like with a lot of marketers as an example. It's like, "Well, what do you know about TikTok?" "Oh, no, I don't do TikTok. I don't know anything about that." Or, we're doing this Zoom call and they're like, "Oh, where's the button?" And all these things. It's like, you're showing that you're not relevant, right? It's not ageism. You're showing a lack of relevance to somebody that these are the currency of what everybody's dealing in now, but you're just sort of opting out of it. Like, well, that's for the kids or that's for somebody else. And it's like, well, I don't know that you can lay all that at the feet of ageism.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. I mean, it's very easy, to sort of fall back on that as a rationale. And it's not to say it doesn't exist, but I think that you're precisely right. Some advice that I often give to people is that if you are, let's say 50 plus or 60 plus, and you're in the job market or the consulting market, one of the best things that I think you can do is to over-index on surprising things, to sort of shatter expectations. If you're coming in and you're 65 and you're wanting a position in marketing, and they're like, so tell me what you're doing, tell me what your experience is. And if that person says, well, I've really been going deep on TikTok and I have 100,000 followers and blah, 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 they're going to be like, what? You have just broken every single mold. You're going to freak them out so much. They're going to say, this is a really interesting person. And it actually makes you far more compelling. So I love that. And I think it's exactly right. If we're not taking ourselves out of the game, I think almost everyone would be more than willing to give us a chance.
I think that's exactly spot on. You had mentioned earlier, and this is a big topic for me, is networking. And most people are introverted, or it seems like most people are introverted. My wife doesn't even want to call the pizza guy, and I love it. Like I get energized by it. What's your advice just sort of on networking, particularly for people where it just feels weird, awkward, and maybe even manipulative?
Yeah. So in the long game, I actually have a whole chapter talking about this, because I do think that building relationships is of course critical to your own long game, to your own professional success. I think we all sort of intuitively understand that other people are going to be a big part of it, whether it's making you aware of opportunities or help advocating for you or something like that. Most people get it. I think the question is like, well, how do you get to that? Because you're exactly right. I mean, when people think of like networking, they think of a networking event, which is usually horrible. It's, oh, here's a bunch of people who need something. Let's put them all in a pen and then they can talk to each other.
Sounds like the Hunger Games, but okay.
Yeah, pretty much. So, it's interesting. A piece of research that I always really like is my friend Francesca Gino at Harvard Business School has done a lot of research into networking, and part of why people find it so distasteful. And what she discovered is that people oftentimes, not everyone, of course, but a lot of people literally think of networking as dirty. And as part of this experiment that she ran, where like people rated the desirability of different items, like, oh, would you rather have a this or a this? Apparently, after being prompted about networking, the desirability of cleansing items like soap and detergent and toothpaste, everybody's like, give me that, because they felt so dirty. But the other interesting finding, which I think is important and is what contextualizes it, is that the part that felt dirty to them, it's not like making friends. I mean, obviously people like making friends. This is a thing humans enjoy. The part that they didn't like is feeling that they were out for something, that they were looking for some kind of a transactional gain. And the truth is, honestly, that should make you feel dirty if you're going to use someone as an instrument. And so, what I like to suggest, sort of adage that I talk about in the long game is one of my rules that I practice and that I try to suggest for others is what I call no asks for a year. Because if you are building relationships purely for just like common interests, cool person, nice person to know, they could be a friend, then you don't ask them for something, and I don't mean, of course, like a simple thing like, hey, Bob, where'd you get that shirt? But, if it's like, oh, hey, Bob, on your show, you had this famous person. I really want to meet that famous person. Will you introduce me? That is an ask with political capital. And so often what gives networking a bad name is that you meet somebody and 5 minutes later, they're trying to extract value from you that is not commensurate with the depth of your relationship. And so it feels weird, as it should. And so I think if we take that off the table and if we sort of name what's wrong with it, if we understand like, oh, what's wrong with this situation is that person is extracting value too rapidly, then I think that we can just relax and try to enjoy like, hey, let's make friends, which is kind of a nice thing.
Yeah. So one of the things, and I'm sure this is not original, but a word picture that we use is it's like going to an ATM and you haven't made any deposits. Like you don't make withdrawals from an account that you haven't made any deposits in. The first article I ever wrote on LinkedIn was called "The Most Powerful Question You Can Ask." and it was around networking. And it was actually born from a guy that was networking with me, and this is kind of a different element of why people don't want to do it, but he was actually feeling shame because he had lost his job and he felt like he's doing alms for the poor, will you please help me? And in his body language, everything, it was sad. And I wanted to like you have a whole body of experience, talents, relationships. You have lots of assets that you bring to the party here. So the most powerful question you can ask is, how can I be of help to you, Dorie? Personally or professionally. And the personally part implies you've taken the time to get to know them a little bit, right? So it has to be authentic.
Yeah.
Right. And it can't just be, oh yeah, Bob, so I'm supposed to ask how can I help you? Right. But it's genuine and you're truly trying to help. And of course, sowing and reaping is a thing. And I think that really becomes the difference with it not being manipulative. It's sowing and reaping. If you plant and you keep planting, you know what? The natural course of events is things grow from that. And there's a harvest, right? And you get to reap. And yet it seems like until people have a broader understanding of what building real relationships is like, that's known as networking, it does feel weird. And as you say, it should, when it's really being just more Machiavellian about the whole thing.
Yeah, I think you raise a really important point, Bob, about just the genuineness of it. Sometimes, in the common way that even good advice is sometimes misused. I've sometimes run across people that will take and how can I help you today? And it's interesting because I sort of feel like it's almost a little bit of a gotcha device where they're using it basically to say it, to kind of prompt me to say it. And, they're like, so Dorie, how can I help you? And I'm like, I don't really know you or anything about who you are. So I actually have no idea how you can help me, but thanks. And then I'm like, okay, I feel guilty. I don't want to look like a jerk. So I'm like, how can I help you? And they're like, oh, glad you asked. Yeah. And then they'll like reel off the thing. So I think that, really just making sure that, always that we're doing it from a place of positive intention and not the sort of switcheroo kind of thing is really key. One of my favorite sort of add-ons to that is I love it if people can come, and I mean, this presupposes, of course, that you're not meeting for the first time, that, they know something about you. But I think one of the coolest things is when people come and they have a sort of hypothesis about how they can help you. Like, oh, well, from what I know about Dorie, she does blah, blah, blah. I wonder if she might need da, 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 da. And then they can ask, it's sort of like if somebody, whatever, they're caring for a sick person. And if you say, well, how can I help you? The person, they don't really know, or they feel embarrassed to ask. But if you say, Bob, I want to make you a casserole. Do you like a pasta casserole or a tuna casserole? Which one? And then you can be like, oh gosh, I guess I like pasta better. And then be great. I'm going to give it to you on Monday. And it's like, oh, good. I've taken the pressure off Bob. And then, I know he'll like it, but he doesn't have to be like all weird about, gosh, could you make me a casserole?
Let's take half of a break here because we've covered a bunch of good stuff. I'd like to come back in just a second and pick up the thread on what I'd like to talk next about resilience, because that's a big topic. So with that, we'll be back in a minute. And we're back. Dorie, great to see you again. So really have enjoyed what we've talked about so far around networking and strategic thinking about careers, and that we have more choices than we think that we have, especially when it comes to reinventing ourselves. One of the topics in the long game that really resonates with me is this notion of resilience. We talk with our clients sometimes about the road to yes is littered with no. And it is, right? I mean, and it's a weird bit of gravity, but the roller coaster has more downs than ups. It's just sort of, particularly in a job search, because there's so many rejections on the way to acceptance. And I was wondering if you could help people who are listening, just in the construct of the long game, how to think about resilience, why it's important, and what they should take from it.
Yeah, thank you, Bob. That's great. And I think it's so important that you beat that drum with the folks that you're working with, because I've seen this so often. I mean, the really difficult part about playing the long game, whether it is the job search, whether it is, sort of the long-term picture of crafting a great career, is that there's often what can feel like a fairly vast distance between the intention that you're setting at the outset and then actually achieving whatever it is at the end. And I like to think of it in some ways as almost like a tunnel. And the problem with the tunnel is that once you're in it, you don't know how long it is. And so if somebody was able to tell you, well, Bob, the tunnel is 4.2 miles. And so, okay, if you're trekking for a while and you're like, gosh, all right, good. I should be at the halfway point. No problem. I'll keep going. This might be a dark, dank tunnel, but something positive is going to happen at the end. But, the problem for all of us is that we don't know. Is it a 1 mile tunnel? Is it a 4 mile tunnel? Is it a 100-mile tunnel? And we don't know, and we actually can't know sometimes. And so a lot of people lose faith in between, even though, we know eventually they are going to emerge from this tunnel. But a lot of people get distracted or, just depressed about, oh, it's not working. And they immediately go to, well, it'll never work. And that's really unfortunate, because what I actually see a lot more of is people giving up too soon because they just feel like, oh, well, I already tried this and it didn't work. I see a lot more people giving up too soon rather than people hanging on too long to something that is not going to work. So I think that resilience is a really crucial factor here. And, it goes back to just the question of, number one, trying to frame things so that whatever you're doing, even if it's not immediately yielding the ultimate result that you want, that you can get some value out of it so you can still feel good about it in the process. And, just as an example, let's say somebody's starting a podcast or a blog or, they're doing whatever. And, they might love to have 100,000 downloads a month. For them, that's success. That is clearly not going to happen immediately. And so if you do it 3 months and, you've got some really low number of downloads, a lot of people will quit and say, oh, well, this was a waste of time. But the question that I like to ask is, all right, but what can make it worthwhile in the short term? Maybe you're interviewing really interesting people that's helping you build your community, build your network. Maybe you're learning things from them. That is something that even today you can get value from, even if you don't have 100,000 people who are listening. So what is the value you can extract today? And that sort of keeps it going. And the second part that I think is really useful, which a lot of us fail to do, and I talk about this a bit in my book, The Long Game, is what I call waiting for the raindrops and looking for the raindrops. Because ultimately, if we think in this metaphor that the big success, landing the dream job or getting the thing is sort of the thunderstorm where it's like, yes, the skies open up and all is well. The truth is, it is almost never that a thunderstorm comes out of nowhere, right? There's the clouds blowing in, there's the few little drops of rain, there's the little bit of lightning on the horizon. There are signs, there's clues, but we often fail to look for them. And so I think it's really, really important for us to make sure that we're scanning the horizon and looking for these small micro things. I mean, you might feel really discouraged because you've been looking for a job for quite a while and nothing's happening. But you know what? If you started out and you got 0 callbacks, and now all of a sudden you're starting to get more callbacks, even if you didn't land the job, it means you are doing something right. It means you're doing something better along the way, because more and more people are saying, well, let's at least bring him in and we can have a conversation. So we have to acknowledge that and recognize those things so that we can actually know where we're making progress and understand that we're getting closer to that goal.
Yeah, part of what that's awesome. Part of your raindrops reminds me of Jim Collins in The Flywheel, right?
Yes.
It doesn't feel like anything's happening. It doesn't feel like anything's happening because it's not spinning, in 5th gear right now, but it is moving. It is budging. The other thing that I'd like to hear you talk about with resilience, and maybe I'm projecting, so don't let me too badly, but is it's easier to be resilient when there's a purpose and a belief behind why I'm doing this, right? That's maybe more than just economical.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is always true and important, that if we feel a sense of mission, of positive momentum that can help carry us. So some of the research that I find most interesting is research that was done a number of years ago by a Harvard professor named Teresa Amabile, and she wrote a book called The Progress Principle. And what she discovered is that the most sort of satisfied employees, the people who felt the greatest sense of purpose and satisfaction in their work, were ones who every day made some degree of progress, even if it was tiny, on a goal that felt meaningful to them. If you can feel like, okay, this might take me 10 years to accomplish, but every day I'm moving forward in a very small way toward it, that is enough to actually give us the sense that we're getting there. And that's really powerful for us as humans.
Yeah. One of the things that pops in my mind, I talk sometimes about the entrepreneur's cocktail, and it's equal parts hubris and naivete. Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah. But on the naivete part this should be happening way faster. And maybe that's the hubris part too, but it's like, hey, this is an amazing idea. This should be happening way faster. And it's like, sorry, man, that is just not how things work. The overnight success, is never. They were playing in bars and clubs and frat houses and everything else before, they were selling out arenas. But, it just takes time, and it's not sexy. And again, there's a lot of, I think one of the benefit finding exercises is figuring out what doesn't work. Right. And that not everything is a big hit, but it's sort of the Thomas Edison, well, I've found 1,000 ways that it doesn't work. Well, that's progress, actually, right? Is figuring out what doesn't work. Last thing that I was hoping that we could talk about, and I want to be mindful of the time, is this whole notion, and it probably ties all the way back to reinvention, is continuous learning. And we talked earlier about ageism, like, well, I press the stop button on learning. Like I'm not learning. I've done all the learning I'm going to do. And just if you could talk to listeners a little bit about, just the importance of continuous learning and how they should be thinking about that.
Yeah, thank you, Bob. I think that's a really important strand. It's interesting. I mean, of course, we all know theoretically, like, yes, keep learning. That's good. But for me, one of the ways that I like to think about it and frame it up is that it is very easy for us as humans, as professionals, to essentially keep milking the thing that's already working, right? It makes all the sense in the world. Oh, God, I've got a good thing. Let's keep doing that. Let's double down on that. And that is great up to a point. But the truth is, circumstances always change in some way. We don't know how. Maybe it's an external macro circumstance, like, oh, hey, there's a pandemic. Maybe there's a market circumstance. Oh, there's a new competitor with a sort of faster whatever. Maybe it's an internal thing. Your company does a reorg or whatever, but things are always changing in some way. And so if all of your energy is focused on maximizing what you're already doing, this sort of exploit, then it's great while it works, but it leaves you exceedingly vulnerable in the future. So you need to sort of, as they say, balance the exploiting with the exploring. And, Google very famously talked about 20% time, where they encourage employees to spend up to 20% of their time doing, sort of speculative work, experimenting with things, seeing about what could come next. And I think that is really important for all of us, regardless of where you work, regardless of what you do, to allocate a portion of your personal time to be learning about new things, exploring new hobbies, new passions, new skills, whatever it is, whether it's directly related to your professional life or not. Maybe it's, something different, but it's giving you insight, information, and something new to play with that may turn out to be really valuable to you in a future circumstance that we cannot yet predict.
Yeah, well, and, not only is always some kind of change, but it seems like it just happens faster and faster and faster. Right now, some people are freaking out on ChatGPT and, oh my gosh, what's that going to do to whatever? Well, and there's going to be the next thing and the next thing and the next thing, and it's going to continue to happen. And if you're curious, it's funny when we're interviewing business leaders on this podcast. I often will ask, what are like the top talent attributes that you look for when you're interviewing somebody and building your team? And the consistent number one answer is a natural curiosity. which double clicks onto the question. If I say I'm curious, great, Bob. Tell me, like, what have you been reading? What podcasts have you been listening to? Tell me something new that you've learned that may not have anything to do with work or does have something to do with work. And if you start going, maybe not as curious as they claim. We had Steve Cadigan, who is LinkedIn's first CHRO and wrote the book Workquake, which is awesome. Not as good as the Dorie Clark book, of course, but it's still good. And but he talks about basically the superpower moving forward is being an agile learner and just being able to constantly stay immersed in learning something new. And I think it also ties to we're just going to be working a lot longer and just neuroplasticity, just keeping our brain soft, right? And able to accept new information. So I really appreciate how you're sort of, doing a clarion call on, keep learning, guys. You need to keep learning. It's fun, actually. And it just makes you more valuable and more interesting, as your career continues to progress. So want to be super mindful of the time here, Dorie. Are there any, there are probably 1,000, but any kind of parting thoughts that you would leave with folks? And maybe it might be, around the long game or reinventing yourself, but just a parting thought that you'd like to leave folks with.
Yeah, thank you very much, Bob. I think that's great. It's such a pleasure to talk with you. I will mention two things. The first is if anyone wants to go even deeper to think about professional reinvention, I have a free resource, which is my Reinventing You self-assessment. Folks can get it at dorieclark.com/reinvent. So that's something that might be helpful. And the second piece that I would just want to share is that, especially over the past few years, these have been sort of trying times in some ways. And so one of the concepts that I talk about in my most recent book is the idea of heads up and heads down mode, and just being aware of where you are now and where you have been. Because for a lot of us, I think over the past few years, we have consistently been in heads down mode, just doing, executing. And, that certainly was useful. We needed to do it. It's not that was wrong, but it does become wrong if that's all we do and we get trapped in that cycle. And periodically, we do need to raise our heads up and look around and survey the terrain and say, what's different, what's changed, and how do I adapt to my circumstances to make sure that the things I'm executing on so hard are still the right things. Mm-hmm. And so just being aware that we need to be sensitive enough to shift as the world shifts. And that can be doing a favor to ourselves so that we don't end up being so relentless in what we're pursuing that we get off course.
Awesome. Well, Dorie, again, I was so excited to get to spend some time with you today. This has been better than good, as a friend of mine says. So with that, thank you so much. And we look forward to speaking to you sometime in the very near future. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Hope you have a wonderful week.